Well, welcome to New Covenant United Methodist Church in Farmington, New Mexico. We are glad you could join us online today. My name's Tinker, and feel free to introduce yourself in our comments below. Well, I'm going to take a break from sermon series for this week and next and look at a couple of different passages. The first one we're going to look at is Isaiah. It's chapter 51, verses 1 through 6. So let me go ahead and read that. Listen to me, you that pursue righteousness, you that seek the Lord. Look to the rock from which you were hewn, and to the quarry from which you were dug. Look to Abraham your father, and to Sarah who bore you. For he was but one when I called him, but I blessed him and made him many. For the Lord will comfort Zion, he will comfort all her waste places, and will make her wilderness like Eden, her desert like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness will be found in her, thanksgiving and the voice of song. Listen to me, my people, and give heed to me, my nation. For a teaching will go out from me, and my justice for a light to the peoples. I will bring near my deliverance swiftly. My salvation has gone out, and my arms will rule the peoples. The coastlands wait for me, and for my arm they hope. Lift up your eyes to the heavens, and look at the earth beneath. For the heavens will vanish like smoke, the earth will wear out like a garment, and those who live on it will die like gnats. But my salvation will be forever, and my deliverance will never be ended. I was thinking about the context of this passage today is when the Israelites had been thrown into captivity by the Babylonians and then scattered all over the Babylonian world. I'm quite sure that they were scared, and it made me think about a time when I was scared, and I was probably about 12, somewhere around then, maybe a little bit younger. But my dad was between jobs, and times were a little bit tough, and we'd been spending a lot of time with my uncle because my mom and dad were taking on odd jobs, been working on a shrimp boat for a little bit. So we'd go down. My uncle lived across a field, a road, and another field from us with my grandmother, and so we'd go down there and spend some time with my grandma and my uncle. And he had an old bike, and I really, really loved this old bike. It was a pre-World War II bike. It was very heavy, an old Western Flyer. And so I got to talking to him about the bike, and he told me I could have the bike, but that it needed fixed up. And then if you were going to have a bike, you had to take care of it. Well, I told him I didn't really know how to fix up a bike, and he said, well, let's do that. Let me show you how to do that. And so he showed me how to take the bike completely apart. While we had it apart, we sanded it down and repainted it, and then he showed me how to lubricate all the parts, and we put it all back together. And I'm going to tell you, I had the snazziest bike in town. It was silver, and we'd painted the fenders and chain cover Spanish blue. It was beautiful. And it looked so nice that people would always tell me, where did you get a bike like that? Can I buy a bike like that? It was just an incredibly beautiful bike. Still have it actually, and right now Brienne is taking on, my youngest daughter is taking on that project of taking it apart and sanding it and putting it back together now. But anyway, after we finished doing all of this and putting it together, and we were getting all these comments about it, it occurred to us that maybe we could make a little extra money before some of the money came in on the shrimp boat by making a few bikes and putting them together. And we had bike parts laying around. My uncle had some bike parts laying around, and we knew various places where we could come up with some bike parts, buy some old scrap bikes. And we did that. We sold a few and thought, you know what, this could be a great little side business, especially for the summer. And my parents really thought it was great too. So between shrimping, they wanted to participate as well. Well, my uncle knew of a guy that had a scrap yard that had all this different scrap metal that he had sorted out. And so he talked to his friend and was told, sure, you can come out and look through the piles, but after closing, sometime in the evening, come out. And just so you know, most of the bike parts are in the front, but there's some in the back. And it's out in the boonies. But we went, my mom and dad and my brothers and I, and my uncle, and my mom and dad were sorting through the front pile, and we realized that it had most of what we needed but was missing some of the framing that we needed. So we decided we'd try the back pile and see what was back there. So my uncle, my brothers, and I, we headed back there and started going through it and found a lot of good stuff and started setting it in a pile to take back and forth to the front where the car was parked and where my parents were. And we weren't paying attention and realized it was getting dark on us. So we decided we needed to start carrying some of that stuff to the front. We were going to have to call it good for the night and then take that stuff up. And we started our trips to the front. Well, as we were making one of our trips, I don't remember if it was the first one or somewhere in the middle, we were going past a big pile of scrap and noticed there was a mountain lion sitting at the top of it. It was just sitting there, but we were still scared. And of course my uncle told us to freeze, not to run. And he started, shooing it, trying to shoo it off, hollering at it, wouldn't go. And over time I could tell from my uncle's voice he was getting a little more and more scared because it wouldn't go away. So he finally started throwing some stuff at it, and it still wouldn't go away. Not sure what to do, my uncle said, let's go ahead and just quietly walk past it, and maybe it'll leave us alone. So we start to go around, start to just quietly walk past, and as we do, the mountain lion crouches down like it's stalking us. Well, of course, this concerns us all greatly. We start hollering, we start throwing things because we just know it's going to come down and get us. But it just crouches and stays there. So we're quite nervous, not quite sure what to do. My uncle thinks, well, let's back up a little bit, give it some room, maybe it'll leave. So as we back up, sure enough, it sits up again and just continues to look at us. So again, my uncle tries throwing things, hollering, things like that. And of course you can imagine how scared we were getting as kids. All holding on to each other, probably all holding on to my uncle's pant leg where he can't even move, wanting so bad to run, just being terrified, thinking safety is just, if we can just get past it, safety is in with my parents and in the car. He continued to holler at it. And again, after hollering at it and it's just standing there watching us, he decides yet again, let's just go ahead and walk around. But sure enough, as we walk around, it does the same thing again and it crouches down like it's stalking us. So at this point, it's quite obvious my uncle's starting to freak out and he starts hollering for my mom and dad. Now, we don't realize that they can't hear us. But they had started getting worried about us because we'd been gone an awful long time. So a few minutes later, we see them coming down towards us with flashlights, hollering at us, where are you guys? And of course we start hollering back, there's a mountain lion on top of the trash for this junk pile. And so they flash their light up there and they're like, where? And of course we don't see it when they flash their light up there. And so we're scared that it's either come down and it's a lot closer to us than we realized, or maybe it's gone, but now we don't know where it is. So we all bunch up, they come running up to us, and so we start telling them it was up there and that it actually was coming after us and everything. And so they've got the flashlight up there and we don't see it. And we do a lot of hollering and we decide, well, it must be gone. So we decide we'll go ahead and walk down the trail. Well, as soon as my parents take the flashlight off the top of this junk pile and start to walk back down towards the car, the mountain lion's sitting back at the top. So of course, we kids in particular were probably the first to know and start hollering, it's back, it's back. My dad throws his flashlight up there and it's gone. All that's up there is this piece of tin and some piping. We're like, really? It was just there. It's just there. So of course my dad starts frantically flashing the light around up and down the pile looking for it, and we don't see it. Decide, well, we just need to start walking and getting out of here. So put the flashlight back on the trail, and guess what? The mountain lion's back. And by this point, it's crouched and it's, we're figuring coming down the trail at us. So we all holler at my dad. He throws the flashlight back up on it, and it's gone. All that's up there is a pile of tin and some pipes. And we're like, swear, we just saw it. Daddy, it was just up there, and it was crouching like it was fixing to stalk and come down the pile again. So my dad takes the flashlight back to the trail. We're just going to keep going, and it's back again. Flashlight on it, it's gone. Flashlight back on the trail, and it's back again. And we're thinking, surely that piece of tin and that piping is not the mountain lion we were seeing. And it was. And we're like, but we saw it move. And my uncle, so glad an adult was there, to testify with us that he saw it move too. So we walked back a few steps and looked, and sure enough, there was the cat sitting. If we walked forward a few steps, there was the cat crouching. But with the flashlight, it was just a piece of tin and piping from two different angles. But it ends funny, but it was one of the scariest moments in my life. The good news is now that we knew that it was not a mountain lion, we freely walked back and forth past it to get the rest of the bike frames that we wanted and take them to the car. The history had proven to us that it was not a mountain lion. Well, the reason I'm sharing this story is because we have a similar thing going on in the passage today. The Israelites are very afraid. They have lost the war with the Babylonians, and the Babylonians practice scattering their people, the people they've conquered, so that they won't rise up against them. And so they have taken all the Israelites that are left. Remember, not all of them are left. The men would have gone out into battle and fought and lost. So a lot of just wives with children, elderly people, and very young people. A lot of the young men would have been lost at war. So these people are now being scattered all over the Babylonian Empire. And the Babylonians aren't saying, okay, well, you guys all have the same last name, your same village, we'll keep you together. No, actually, they wanted to do the opposite. They didn't want people that knew each other to be together. They didn't want family groups together because they didn't want the people to get together and rise up against them. So they're scattering the Babylonians everywhere. The Israelites everywhere. And the Israelites are afraid. Very afraid. They don't know what's going to happen to them. The Babylonians don't want them to speak their native languages. They don't want them to worship their God. And so they're afraid. And in the middle of all of this comes a word from God that you don't need to be afraid. And the reason you don't need to be afraid is because I've always kept my promises. And to prove that, look at your history. Look at where you came from. Look at just Abraham and Sarah. Abraham was one man married to a barren woman, and they were both past childbearing years. But God promised him that he would be the father of many nations. And so it was. And God has now promised that there will be deliverance for the Israelites someday from the Babylonians. And they don't need to be afraid because history has already shown that God keeps his promises. So they can rest assured that if God has now sent a prophet to tell them that someday they will be restored, that they will be delivered, then it's true. History is an amazing thing. If you get hit, let's say you're playing baseball, and you get hit in the head by a ball, it hurts. It hurts so bad that if someone keeps throwing a ball at you, you're going to keep flinching because you don't want to get hit in the head by that ball anymore. But let's say you put on a helmet with a face guard, and you have that on, and ball hits you in the head, and you're like, oh, that didn't hurt too bad. Now, I wouldn't recommend this because things can go wrong. You could get hurt. But let's say you get hit with this helmet on, and you realize, that didn't hurt. And it happens a second time, and man, Like, wow, that's amazing. As long as I have this helmet and the face guard on, I don't really have to worry so much about flinching from these balls. And so history has shown you that the helmet works. Now, if you have the helmet on, though, and you don't remember the history, you're still going to flinch every time the ball comes. But if you remember that it protects you, if you remember what has happened in the past and that it works, you'll have more confidence. And you'll stand there straighter and make an effort to swing at the ball because you're not so worried if it does hit you. You know, we humans have a tendency to be afraid of what we don't know. And so God, knowing that, has historically reminded us of our past. If you look at the Israelites, He told them to have festivals, yearly festivals, as reminders of things He had done for them. For example, the Passover, the Exodus from Egypt. They were to celebrate it yearly so that they would remember how God delivered them from slavery. We have Easter as our reminder of deliverance from slavery to sin versus slavery to Egypt. But God wanted the Israelites to have those festivals so that when they got in those situations where they were afraid, where they wanted to flinch, they could think back and say, you know, we just had a festival about God's deliverance and God's promises. We don't need to be afraid now. That's exactly what God wanted the festivals to do for them, to remind them that they didn't need to be afraid, that God had made promises and always kept them in the past, so any promise He makes now will be kept at some point. Now, it may never be as fast as we want, but it will be kept. We as Christians have that same history. We share that same history of God keeping His promises. And we have promises in our future that we can rest assured will be kept. Christ will come again. The redemption of the world will be fulfilled. It has started with Christ on the cross, but it will be fulfilled. We have those to look forward to, and the reason that we can look forward to those in hope and joy, despite our present circumstances, is all the history that we have as Christians and the Jews had as Israelites of God keeping His promises. So we have hope instead of fear because we have a history that we can look at that shows us that God keeps His promises. You know, God tells us in this passage, if we rely on the things of the world, they're going to disappear. They're not going to work. He literally says the things of this world will go up like smoke, that they wear out like a garment, and those who live on it will die like gnats. We can't put our hope in these things, what we can do. We have to put our hope into what God can do. And God can do amazing things through us, through His Spirit. But we have to put our hope and our trust in those things. Otherwise, fear will overwhelm us. If we have to fix the world and the state it's in, we should be afraid. But if we know that God has promised that He will fix the world, no matter what shape it's in, then we have hope. We have trust. We have faith. So that's the main point of our passage today. And it's a big picture. It's looking at Israel as a people. And if we want to apply it, us as Christians, and the hope that we have of what God has promised when Christ returns, and the hope we have of eternal life with Jesus, that He will restore us, deliver us from death. But on an individual level, we also have hope because we all have a history with God. And we have this history we can read about of the things that God has done for people. We have the testimonies of the people around us and what God has done for them. And that is our collective history that we can apply as individuals that God keeps His promises. You know, when we walked with the Lord, we do go through tough times. And there will be times in our life where we'll sit there and we'll say, you know, I don't understand what God is doing. I don't understand why God is allowing all this stuff to happen. And we have to trust and remember that God said He will make good out of all things for those that trust the Lord. So our history reminds us that God has done this. That in the past, God has always kept His promises. And if that's a promise He's made, He will keep it. So remember the history of walking with the Lord so that you face no fear going forwards. Knowing God always keeps His promises. He always takes care of us and delivers us. Amen.